How we doing, folks? My guest today is going to be two-time Olympian Michelle Roark. Michelle is one of the best U.S. female mogul skiers of all time. She had an illustrious career. She had 105 World Cup starts, 15 World Cup podiums, 6 World Cup wins. She was a two-time U.S. national champion. She had a World Championship silver medal. She was the 1999 overall World Cup dual mogul champion. And in this episode, we talk about that illustrious career. We talk about her journey, some of the setbacks and failures, and obviously the successes. And we talk about her multiple passions. We talk about her journey in skiing and how she was able to juggle her other passion, chemical engineering. And we talk about how she got that degree in chemical engineering cum laude from Colorado School of Mines and how she turned that into her current passion, Field Lab. It was really great to be able to have this conversation with Michelle. We had a lot of fun, and I really hope you folks enjoy this episode. Thanks. All right, we're rolling. Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time. It's really great to see you and hear that you're doing so well, and I really appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, it's kind of starting off when I was doing a lot of the research for this and trying to figure out, I was just, how did you get into, it seemed like you started out with athletics and figure skating and then kind of found your way into freestyle after that, right?
That's correct. Yes, I was an extensive figure skater. I loved it.
Mm,
Um, and I was nationally ranked and loved it. It was just too much of a financial drain on the family. And when they got a divorce, that was over.
okay. And so why was the turn to freestyle skiing? Did you just kind of see it and like want to join the program? Because it was Winter Park, right? Where you the club you started with?
Yeah, I never really skied with Winter Park Comp Center because I couldn't afford it.
Ah,
But
okay.
Winter Park Mary Jane is like the best. Well, I've skied all over the world now, and I can say by far, hands down, it's the best mogul skiing in the world. So it was a great place for mogul skiing. Mogul skiing at the time still had, acro ballet and seemed to be an easy transition to like carry my skating skills into skiing.
Hmm.
Edge control, balance, being able to just handle coaching and body awareness. Um, and also my father was a really big skier, and if his kid liked it or not, they were going to learn to ski. So every weekend we would go skiing, even though my figure skating pros totally disapproved. In the end, it was really beneficial because it made that transition really easy. Actually, the first year I competed in freestyle. I was 16 and I won junior nationals, and I think I was ranked like fourth in the nation, and I got a NORAM spot on the US ski team.
Hmm. Yeah, so that was I think around like 1990, right? Junior national champion around then, and then a
I don't know.
couple. It said you had a couple, or at least doing the research, like a few years of kind of injuries, because I know you had a long. We were just talking before we came on, like 18 years of World Cup skiing, and one of those things is just I know that's one of the failures or kind of negative things, but I mean it leads to kind of that perseverance and ultimate triumph, like later in life, right? Those hard times with the injuries. So maybe just talk about a few of those that kind of, most skiing careers, there's a laundry list that you kind of run into, especially in the sport of freestyle skiing.
Sure. I mean, injury is certainly a part of it. For me, it was a really long journey. I had nearly 18 years on World Cup, but that included like big gap years where I was
Sure.
recovering from injury. So in the first 7 years on World Cup, I had 7 knee surgeries. And after nearly every one, the doctors told me I would never ski professional moguls again. Um, and then I had a couple more.
Hmm.
And after like I think I was at like number four surgery or five, and the doctor's like, listen, you're gonna be lucky. I mean, you're never skiing professional moguls again, and you'll be lucky if you can ski recreational moguls pain-free. And I ended up recovering from all that. And after my seventh knee surgery, I had 7 more years on World Cup and two Olympic Games and multiple World Cup wins and several other podium finishes and no pain. And today, I skied, like I said, it was like crazy World Cup for almost 18 years. And you and I know what that means, right? It's
Right.
like you have to be tuned in, tapped in, turned on. You have to be fully in your physical body, but almost like tapped into something bigger than yourself, I felt like, but fully present. Like if you have to go 25 miles an hour and jump off a jump and go at least 15 feet into the air to clear your backflip with a full twist. I mean, you're not thinking about what you're going to have for dinner that night, right? You're
Right.
fully engaged. And I think That's so cool in retrospect because what kind of job requires you to be fully present every day
Mhm.
and it, as tuned in, tapped in, turned on as you can be to help you accomplish amazing physical feats. I mean, what we did, what they still do is pretty amazing. I mean, I look
Mhm.
at it now, I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? But now, I've been retired for a while, and I will say I've had two near-death experiences since I retired from mogul skiing. So definitely having that mindset trained me to survive those accidents.
Mhm.
Which were horrific and I think probably would have killed anybody else that doesn't have that quick reflex and the ability to stay present when tragedy's happening.
Right.
So anyways, has so many pros and cons go along with all of it and with all of the injuries, and you learn more from failure than you do from winning. And so there were
Unfortunately.
yeah, but there were definitely a lot of failures, but
Sure.
I I couldn't be happier with where I am today because, the chemical engineering and competing in the Olympics, I had wanted to do those two things since I was 5. I always thought I would go to the Olympics in skating. And when
Mhm.
that didn't happen, I was like, you asked, how did I get into freestyle? I was just thinking to myself, how can I still make this dream come true? How can I still become an Olympian, even though I can't do ice skating anymore? Because it honestly was such an expensive sport. There was no way at 15 I can make that feasible. And everybody's like, well, skiing is not cheap. But there were ways around that. I was
Sure.
actually kicked out when I was 15 and I lived in a tent up in Winter Park for about 3 years. I did a lot of
Wow.
couch surfing. I did a lot of making money stretch. I did a lot of things to make it work that,
Mhm.
maybe we don't need to talk about. I would like hike up the hill early in the mornings to get up the mountain so I wouldn't have to pay for lift tickets. That was one of the things. There were a few.
Yeah.
But where there's a will, there's a way. And
Sure.
I do a ton of charity work now, so I think I'm good.
So that drive though, I mean, that's incredible drive and resiliency to want to go out and hit those goals. I mean, where does that or yeah, where does that come from for you? I mean, it was the goal of trying to be in the Olympics at such a young age and then chemical engineering, like where would you say that drive comes from? Because there's not a lot of people that are willing to go through and stretch and couch surf and live in a tent up in freezing cold Colorado and like all
Yeah.
these things are like absolutely remarkable and show a lot of drive to get where you want to. I mean, not only one-time Olympian, two Olympics, unbelievable career.
Thank you.
So yeah, and that's just the athletic career. And then you get into the life, goes on after. It's always funny when you talk to people and like, oh, I'm retired. And they're like 27 in our
29.
sport or 25, it's younger now. They're like, oh, I'm retired, like, or they say they go through their stints in rehab. It's like, oh, knee rehab. But
Yeah.
where would you say that drive kind of has come from?
Uh, I mean, since I was 5,
Hmm.
literally had those two goals, and they seem so unrelated,
Hmm.
chemical engineering and Olympian. They seem so unrelated, and I think it's so interesting how they accumulated into what I do now so
Hmm.
perfectly, and what I do now is so what I'm meant to do, and I wouldn't have had the tenacity or experiences to actually do what I'm doing now, which is helping so many people around the world. And you mentioned I had an extensive career and a lot of accomplishments in freestyle mogul skiing, and I'm super proud of it. I tell you, I wear my Olympic ring every day. I do not think these should be locked up in a security box anywhere or well,
Yeah.
I think it's a huge honor because it is so hard, and I'm preaching to the choir here. I'm sure your listeners know exactly what I'm talking about, like how incredibly hard it is to qualify to ski in the games and to do well from there. Um, so anyways, I'm very proud of what I've done in skiing, but I'm far more proud of what I do today and the people that were able to help. And I think that was just part of my mission in life. And maybe
Hmm.
that's why the tenacity really came out. I also think when I was kicked out and I was forced to, well, not forced, I mean, just I had no other means. I was living in a tent in Winter Park, and I really, really developed this beautiful, I don't want to sound too like mystical or anything, but a beautiful connection with nature and spirituality that guided me through so much of what I've been through.
Yeah, I mean that's wild going through and how so as you go through and you decide that you're finishing with your ski career, right? You go after the last Olympics, and then how quickly do you know where the next step is? I mean, is it take a little bit of like soul searching? You get the degree in chemical engineering, cum laude from Colorado School of Mines, and then is it like, all right, I know exactly what I want to do with this, or is it take a little bit after you've kind of hit two of those big milestones you had since you were 5 years old?
I love that you mentioned I was cum laude. I was like working my butt off for that honor. And my dad is like, what are you doing? Nobody's ever gonna know. They're not gonna know. And I'm like, no, no, they're gonna know because I'm gonna tell them.
They know. They know.
Because that was hard. That was definitely hard, especially after having a long gap. Because
Mhm.
I went to Colorado School of Mines and they only offer certain classes certain semesters. So at some point there I was just at a standstill for what I could accomplish while I was still on World Cup. And so I still had quite a bit to do when I got there and retired. And I also started having children right away. And I was like, well, ready for that next chapter in my life.
Mhm.
And so you asked how that transition went. Well, while I was on World Cup, I always knew what I was going to do once I was retired. I was already working on it. I mean, I always flipped houses to be able to afford World Cup. I know your listeners probably know how challenging that is when you
Oh
first
yeah.
make World Cup and you're on in a non-funded position. How does this girl living in a tent, figure that out? And I have some very creative stories I could tell you about how I did manage that. And one of them was flipping houses and making money from that, and rolling that over, and then doing VRBO with my place in Park City while I was
Mhm.
on World Cup. And I'm trying to think what make sure I'm answering your original question. So I was already doing that kind of thing. And then I had just had my heart set on a building in downtown Denver that I would just go by. And I just loved it so much that I
Mhm.
don't know what it was, the energy. And it was a perfect triangle and brickwork everywhere. And I followed this building for 3 years and I get it on foreclosure at the auction. And I'm renovating it so that this guy can rent the space from me and run his salon and spa out of it. And after I do this beautiful renovation, it was 2008 and the stock
Okay.
market crashed.
Oh.
His financing pulled out. And at that point, I just needed styling chairs and shampoo bowls, and I had a salon. So I'm on World Cup. I'm doing chemical engineering at Mines, and now all of a sudden I'm running a salon and spa in Denver. That was crazy. But athletes, especially at that level, they're typically overachievers, right? And we
Mhm.
we figure out how to get it done. And my salon and spa was like top of the town for 5 years in a row. It was really successful, and it was a great like it was a great opportunity for me to expand the research I was doing in the energy from biological essences, and it kind of led to everything else. So if you're asking, how did I know what I was going to do after skiing, I already had a lot of plates full that I
Yeah.
couldn't to to tackle.
Interesting. So have you kind of always liked to have a full plate like that as like the overachiever and everything else? I mean, it seems like
Oh.
at that point there's a lot going on. You got a lot of plates and a lot of balls that you're kind of juggling in the air there, let alone like trying to focus in, make sure your body's right to be able to have that peak performance. And then you have the stress of the other businesses going on in the background, and you've got school and like, especially at that period of time, it's not like it is today where you can hop on a Zoom and you're able to do your
Yeah,
classes super
yeah.
easy and like it's a much more of a challenge. Like Skype hardly worked. Like back,
I
like I don't know,
know.
2005, 2006, like Skype was like not, nearly what it is today. So I mean, how did you manage to kind of juggle all that? Was that difficult or was it easy to kind of, all right, now I'm not thinking about skiing. This is actually a little bit of a release for me to kind of focus on a different stress.
No, I mean, it wasn't easy. It was like running a marathon every day. I mean, it wasn't easy, but sink or swim, you
Yeah,
do what you need to do. That was what I needed to do. And it was a path I was on. Maybe there was an easier path because I ask myself all the time, why? I really enjoy my life now. I enjoy so much, not traveling so much. I enjoy so much the work that we're doing, and I enjoy seeing how it helps light people up. And I adored Speedy. He was an aerialist on the U.S. team. He competed with me in 2010 at Vancouver. He got the silver medal, and you know, I didn't realize the struggles he was having, and I wish. I mean, I didn't, I guess I didn't know him as well as some people, but I knew him enough to adore that guy. And I didn't realize there was such another side to that. And I've come across a lot more people suffering from depression
sure.
since then. And what I do and what I make is helping people throw away depression medication and just use our energy bouquets. It's helping people lose weight. It's helping people get dream jobs. It's helping people get more restful night's sleep. It's all of these things that if you don't take care of, they lead to something physical or something tragic.
Mm.
I've lost both my brothers and my bonus mom since I retired. So there's been a lot of that where I just do a deep dive into understanding that better.
So talk a little bit about, Feel Lab and how all the different areas that that's branched out into. I was doing the research on it and I was like, oh my goodness, I thought it was the perfume and then all the different like spots that has blossomed into the business.
Yeah, and you keep wanting to talk about skiing, and I keep talking about Feel Lab because it's so my heart and passion,
Sure.
and obviously my huge focus
Hmm.
today. When I was on World Cup, the sports psychologist said, make sure you visualize with all five of your senses. So hear it, feel it, see it, taste it, smell
Mm, okay.
it. And he could do all of them, but smell, I had no idea what it smelled like to ski well. So I thought, well, I'll find a fragrance, I'll wear it just for skiing, and it'll be my scent of competition. And we're at a ton of duty-free stores. It's at the airport on long layovers. I tried everything. I mean, J-Lo, Gwen Steph, what you name it, Chanel. And they would often just give me a headache. Sometimes they would burn my nose. They were gone within, an hour.
Hmm.
And so I did some research. I found out how toxic those things can actually be.
Really?
Oh yeah, they say
Hmm.
walking to a cosmetic counter at a department store is more toxic for you in terms of what you smell than an auto mechanic's garage where you have oil and
Really?
gasoline. And yet we're
Wow.
putting that on our largest organ, our skin. And I was looking just for something that was going to help empower me, not
Right.
disempower me. So
Sure.
while it was on World Cup, I started thinking I needed to make my own. And I took courses in Graz, Thailand, and New York online in perfumery. And I became a certified perfumer. And I was making these concoctions on World Cup. One in particular was really, really helping me drop into zone, into flow state, which is, as you know, the state all athletes and not even just athletes, any corporate executives before a big talk or even before a big test for a student, we all want to drop into zone where we just don't feel like we could put a foot wrong and things just start flowing.
Hmm.
For athletes, you're trying to have that emotion and memory of skiing perfectly. So when you ski a great run, you really want to lock that in, and then you want to tune into that frequency when you're in the start gate and you're nervous as hell, right?
Right. Yeah,
For me,
no,
like
absolutely.
so nervous I couldn't speak, or I just couldn't even look at the top air. I was so terrified of how the wave just drops away. I'm not allowed to actually say that, but I was freaking I was terrified from day one to the day I ended. Every time I threw a backflip or I did a few backflips, whatever it was, 720s. I was yeah, I'll full on admit that. um, and it took a lot for me to. I had a. I mean, there's a lot of without trying to sound too metaphysical, I'm gonna just go and not too sciencey, but I want to say that we've made some huge gains in quantum physics and in science in the last just even 10 years, let alone 20 years or 100 years, right? Since we
Hmm.
started looking at, unseen matter to describe the world around us, which we were never allowed to do without being killed since the 1600s. So anyhow, that allowed us to tap into amazing technology. And we can now show in science what mystics and yogis and intuitives have always known. We have a huge energy body, and diseases manifest here first before they take form in the physical body. Also, issues and blockages manifest in your energy body. Now, your energy body, we are highly electrical beings, right? We have about 50 trillion cells in our body. Each cell is about 1.4 volts of electricity. That's over 70 trillion volts of electricity, right? We're highly electrical beings. Well, Maxwell's equations prove that around every electrical current that's moving is an electromagnetic field, which is your energy body. It is
Hmm.
literally your energy in motion. It is your emotions. And if you can't get that clear, it's harder for you to perform at your, it's harder for you to get into zone, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Um, and I realized for me, I had a rough childhood. I had an abusive childhood, and there were a lot of tangles in my energy body that I needed to work through to get myself in a state that I could perform at a really high level. And I did a lot to get there. And so, anyways, long story short, when I started making these concoctions, these energy blends, it would immediately clear out tangles in my energy body, and I'd instantly drop into zone and I could stay there. So I could perform a lot longer. It wasn't
Hmm.
taking as much time and energy to drop into zone state, so I wasn't getting as tired during the season. I was skiing way more consistently, and it was a lot less effort to get to
That's
that
good.
state.
Yeah.
So it really prolonged my career because I discovered that halfway between, right? So I was having all these injuries and issues in the first 7 years. And honestly, I'll admit, I didn't know how to ski. Like I just could go fast. I had heart. I could jump high. And I don't think I really understood skiing until about halfway through.
Hmm.
And um, I would contribute that to Cooper Shell. He like broke my skiing apart and rebuilt it and actually taught me an understanding of skiing that I think a lot of people don't have. A lot of people can be great skiers, but not great coaches. But it's rare to
Sure.
find somebody who's a great skier and coach because they have a true understanding of it. And so I'm grateful for what I think I um, was able to gather in the last part of my career, as well as finding the energy from botanicals that um, if your energy body is tangled or cluttered, I know what I say sounds metaphysical, but we actually back this up through science now. I can write equations for everything that I'm talking about. And those tangles lead to something physical. So if you're having 7 knee surgeries, like what the hell's going on? Like
Right.
what is it that you need to work out in your energy body so you can get into alignment with where you're supposed to be?
Now, so what is that like process like to try to go through and figure out the right botanicals and the right, because I'm assuming it's not just a one size fits all. I mean, it's got to be different for each and every person. So what's kind of that process, and what was that like for you? Did it take a while for you to kind of figure out the right, and what happens, I guess, on the other side, like if that balance is off in like the botanicals and everything else, like is the mood a little bit too low compared to where you need it, or how does that kind of that
You know,
work?
these are all great questions, but for one, I think I would just start off by saying botanicals, plant and flower essences,
Sure.
they vibrate at a way higher frequency than we do. So
Okay.
they could never affect you in a negative way. But
Okay. Interesting.
so I was making these concoctions. I didn't have a full understanding for what was going on. And I'm very scientific. I come from the hard science. As soon as I retired, I dove into research on that. Obviously, this sounds like aromatherapy, a true medicine that's been around for 3,000 years. But I was interested to say, like, why is this pushed aside to traditional medicine? And, how can I show people how valuable this is and what an effect it's been able to have on me and others? And I started doing some research into aromatherapy, and it didn't take long to figure out why that's pushed aside. There's a lot of lack of data. There was a lot of contradiction. There was a
Okay.
complete lack of understanding of why it really worked. So I thought, well, I'm going to do all the research and show the world from a scientific perspective how and why this is so important. And so I marched into the head of the chemical engineering department at Colorado School of Mines, where they're notorious for oil and gas. And I said, for my senior design project, I would like to refine a different type of oil, the essential kinds. And
Mhm.
of course, they like laughed in my face and slammed the door. But at this point, I was so used to having doors slammed in my face. There's a lot of politics when it
Right.
comes to being on World Cup. And
Yeah.
I was like, at this point, I had the tools to break down the damn door or build my own, right? And so I didn't give up. I didn't take no for an answer. I eventually found some amazing professors that supported my out of the box thinking. And I was able to do some really profound research there. They gave me a whole lab and my own like gas chromatographer, mass spectrometer. And ultimately what I found, I was trying to prove how and why aromatherapy is so effective and so important. And ultimately what I found is it misses the mark. It misses
Mhm.
the mark a little bit, and that's why it hasn't got the credibility that it deserves. So I was trying to look at something about essential oils as a whole because the practice was to break them into their components
Mhm.
and analyze components. And so we looked at measuring the thermal conductivity through it, the resonance frequency, the surface tension, and some various other things. And what we settled on was measuring the electromagnetic energy. And so I built a device to do just that. And then I had, this isn't my essence bulb, we're actually in my tea room, but
Okay.
my other room, I have a scent organ that's gigantic, and I have essences from all over the world. And so I was able to test hundreds of those on the device I made and group them into 6 different energy waves. And if this is too scientific, just tell me. But I'm
No, no,
always
no, no.
wrapped up in
No,
a
it's
second.
interesting. Yeah, I have a couple. Like, how did you come up with the device? How difficult was that kind of to create to be able to, find those readings and everything? It
Yeah.
sounds like
Well,
that
I
would
mean,
be hard to do.
I could dive into that for sure. I mean, gosh, I think it stems back to looking at the history of things.
Okay.
In the 1600s, we decided to separate church and science. So if
Mhm.
you wanted to study unseen matter, you are a spiritual leader or a priest. If you wanted to study physical matter, you could be a scientist. And it wasn't until the late 1800s, early 1900s, where scientists, mostly men, were getting more comfortable with speaking about unseen matter. And think of what that got us, right? The electron, the proton, it got us telecommunications,
Sure. Right.
satellites,
Yeah.
cell phones. I mean, all this amazing technology in just that small 100-year window of time. And we also got a lot of advancements in terms of medical procedures, right? So
Sure.
MRIs, X-rays, ultrasounds. But when did we ever look at it in terms of our medicine, right?
Mhm.
We can now show that energy medicine is far more effective without the toxic side effects.
Mhm.
That research has really been shoved under the rug as much as possible because obviously you can't patent energy, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And so our standard way of looking at something like an essential oil is to break it apart into its components. So, for example, back in the day, Native Americans would chew on white willow bark and it would get in the body and it would work and work until the headache was gone and it dissipated headaches. And so we took it, we broke it into to its pieces, and we
Mhm.
determined which molecule was primarily responsible for the dissipation of the headache. And we synthesized that in a laboratory and put it in a pill. Today we call it aspirin. So we had been very successful with this sort of technique of breaking
Yeah.
things into their pieces. But I'm looking at something like rose oil, which has about 1,000 molecules in it. And I'm thinking, if you break it into its components, you can't discern the smell of rose by one individual molecule. That's like saying, taste this flower and tell me how a cookie tastes, right?
Mhm.
Like
Right.
you
Yeah.
can't break it into its pieces. You have to measure something about it as a whole. And
Right.
nobody really knew how to measure anything about it as a whole. And that's where I came in, where I was like, how can I look at these essential oils as a whole? Because for example, myrrh oil is a super medicinal oil. It's mentioned in sacred texts over and over again for its healing abilities. In fact, in just the Bible, it's mentioned 150 times. However, if you break it into its components, the third most prominent molecule in there is xylene, which is highly toxic. You look at that at hazardous waste sites, and if that's there, you don't go in. So people in the medical industry that have been trained to break things down, they're like, oh, don't even touch that. It's no good,
Mhm.
right? But
Yeah.
when you get it as a whole, it's super medicinal. So that's, we were looking at various ways of testing, and the best thing we could come up with, or the thing that we landed on, and again, I was working with some really brilliant people at Minds as well, and I'm so grateful that they stepped outside of the box to embrace my what looked like craziness. And then some profound research came out of that. It was really, really interesting. I mean, the professors I was working with didn't think we'd see any difference from essential oil to essential oil because physical chemistry would tell you that the corona discharge is going to be the same for all of them because it's all aromatherapy is um, essences that are made out of benzene rings, and the structure is pretty much the same for all of them, and the primary molecules are the same for all of them. But not only did
Interesting.
I prove that there was a difference, I proved that it was viable, visible, and quantifiable. So I started to get more of their interest at that
Hmm.
point. And then we started looking for, okay, well, so what? What does that really mean? Does that tell us anything? And so I had grouped the essential oils I was looking at into 6 different energy waves, which all had a similar energy footprint. And we were
Okay.
thinking, what does that mean? So then we started looking for commonalities amongst each energy wave, and we looked for social emotional properties, physical properties, major chemical constituents. And again, the professors I was working with really thought that the similarity would be in major chemical constituents, but oddly enough, it wasn't. It was in their social emotional properties. So things that vibrated at like 200 kilojoules per mole had properties that said it releases fear and opens the mind.
Hmm.
So I named that energy wave adventure. And then we had on the flip side, it was about 280 kilojoules per mole, and it said boost energy, boost confidence. We named it charisma. So we were kind of going with these social emotional names. And then I had the salon and spa where I was doing a lot of testing. So even when I was on World Cup, I would have, whenever I was home, I would have
Hmm.
customers come in, and I had a very busy salon. I would make them all fill out a 7-page questionnaire. And then we would go sit down in my essence vault, and we'd choose from 60 to 80 individual essences and build their fragrance from the top, the bottom to the middle. And when
Wow.
they decided on their favorite formula, I put that in a bottle, and voila, they had a scent that was truly their own. But more importantly, I tested it on my energy device and accumulated that data. After doing hundreds and hundreds of those, I put all that data into a spreadsheet and built an algorithm out of it, which helps me determine which energy wave will resonate best with somebody. So it's a quick energy fit you can do on my website. It takes about 3 minutes. Ideally, I would love to put a person on my device that I made to measure the electromagnetic energy of essential,
Hmm.
but I would shock them to the point I would probably kill them. And I'm in the wellness industry, so that's not viable.
Right.
But remember, I told you we have this electromagnetic energy that's vibrating around us. It's
Hmm.
literally your energy in motion. It is your emotion. So if I want to get at the signature frequency of somebody, which is more unique to you than your fingerprint. So everybody is born with a very, very unique signature frequency. And I think it's really interesting that in a lot of metaphysical circles, they're like, oh, you got to raise your frequency, you got to raise your frequency. And I say, bull crap, you have to clear out all the density that's cluttering your energy body. But our God-given frequency is the light of 1,000 stars. And that's actually science. Like if you bring all the electrons in your body into coherence and you clear out your energy body, you give off 5 times the light of the sun. So
Hmm.
we really are the light of, you know, multiple stars.
Yeah. So that's it. So how often, I mean, what's the difference in like what's the feedback been as you started like out at that, the 7-page questionnaires and everything else? You've got it definitely dialed in a little bit more. I mean, has the feedback been pretty exciting and happy from all the customers? Has that been pretty good so far?
Oh yeah, 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 for
Yeah,
sure.
I
I
would
mean, I think
imagine.
that I left out a little piece because you were asking me. I get to this level where I'm like, okay, social emotional properties, and then
Sure.
I have this lab where I'm testing it all out. And that part just really drove me crazy. So, you know, rose might boost confidence in some aromatherapy text, but in another aromatherapy text, it might contradict itself. So it's also pulling from like 3,000 years of storytelling. To me, that wasn't like exact science, which is what I was really trying to get at, right?
Hmm.
Because it's hard to measure somebody's emotional response to something, and
Right.
not a quality data been has backed any of those claims up. It's like I said, it's mostly storytelling. There are a few essential oils that have deep dives into their medicinal effect, but not that many. So that drove me crazy. So then what I did is I got a biofeedback device that measures your heart rate, your body temperature, your blood pressure, your galvanic skin reaction. And I would
Interesting.
make clients come in and do the biofeedback. They would also do my energy fit. And then they would go into a treatment room, and they would get anywhere from 3 to 5 of our products within that energy wave. It
Okay.
would Their service would conclude with their wellness tea, which was, in these great bottles we also designed, but it was also within their energy wave. And then they would come back and do the biofeedback again. And we could literally show them how much physical parameters improved upon interaction with the energy wave that resonated in the highest and best good for them. So I guess I should step back if you're okay and just give a little
Sure.
background when I say frequencies and energy waves. This part is really important because what I did is looked at it in terms of energy because plant, flower, and herb essences vibrate at such a high frequency.
Hmm.
So Einstein told us over 100 years ago, 120 years ago, E equals MC squared. Basically, everything's energy. And when you look at it from that perspective, it flips everything upside down and
Right.
has allowed me to make a very powerful and effective energy medicine. We can't say the word medicine. We actually call it quantum nutrition. So what we make is like a multivitamin for your much larger energy body. So like people take vitamin C or vitamin
Sure.
E or what have
Yep.
you in the physical body. We can show in science that it's more important to take care of the energy body. I think, I love to work out. I still go to the gym all the time. I bike. I love it. I love it. I love it. And I think it is important, very important. But I think what's even more important is to have a membership to something like a spa that works out your energy body, or at
Hmm.
least have things carved out every day that are working out the energy body as well as the physical body, and taking some supplements that might help you work out those tangles. Because ultimately what I found is you're looking at it from energy, so you have to look at it in terms of waves. So if
Yeah.
you can remember back in high school, we have a sine wave and we have a cosine wave,
Right.
and they're opposite. And if you add them together, you get a straight line. They literally dissipate each other. Whereas sine squared amplifies the wave, amplifies the energy. Examples in real life are like noise canceling headphones have crystals in them that are destructive to our frequency of sound, so you get no sound. Laser light is really strong. It can cut through like this building and the next, because it's a whole bunch of electromagnetic energy added together in constructive interference patterns. So it amplifies the energy.
Hmm.
So when we were able to classify these very high vibrational essences from the botanical world according to their energy footprint, and then combine them, I can just show you right here.
Hmm.
You combine them according to that energy footprint, you get a constructive interference pattern, which exponentially increases the energy in, say, this bottle. So
Okay.
these bottles hold these are energy bouquets. It has nearly 20 essences with a similar energy footprint interacting in that constructive interference pattern. Now we take that a step further and we recognize that we all have our own unique signature frequency, more
Hmm.
unique than your fingerprint. If we can discern what that is, we match that in a constructive way to the very powerful energy in these bottles. And in doing so, it has a profound effect on your health and wellness.
Yeah, I can imagine it's got to be a huge, huge difference, especially with so many different things going on in everybody's life. There's so many more distractions nowadays. Everyone's attention span is so short, and it's really, really hard to be able to focus in and be able to, really accomplish the things that you want to on a day-to-day basis with all those different distractions getting in the way and all of the different issues out there for everybody, right? There's a lot going on in the
It's
world.
tough being human, right? But we chose to drop into this for a reason, right? And I think a lot of it is learning how to recognize all the energies going on around you and balance them out. I was on World Cup for a long time. I saw a lot of really talented skiers come
Mhm.
on World Cup, and they didn't last very long.
Mhm.
Why did they not last very long? In my opinion, they didn't know how to protect their energy body. And I know that sounds crazy, but listen to me for a second,
Mhm.
right? I'm standing in the Stargate, or somebody's standing in the Stargate, and
Mhm.
they have this, you just have an amazing run. And your
Mhm.
family's there, and we're all excited, we're all jumping around. You are gonna be on the podium. And the only thing standing between you and a spot at the Olympics and a spot fully funded,
Mhm.
which for somebody who has no money, that's really important, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Is the person in the Stargate, right?
Mhm.
Now you gotta believe that that person coming down, the father and mother and friends of that person standing in the corral wanting to win that competition is hoping that person falls. And there's not anything wrong with that. I mean, well, we wish the best for everybody, but you
Sure.
can
Right.
understand how this would happen. But
Yeah.
thoughts are the most powerful force in the universe, and they really can be effective, especially when they're collective,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
And so I didn't recognize it when I was on World Cup at all, but I fully recognize it now through all of the research I've done and, the area of work that I'm in
Mhm.
through physical parameters, through case studies, through, just my own experience, to various things. But anyhow, so um you really have to have some ways of dealing with that. Not only that, you are friends by association, not by choice. So you're rooming with some girls who are beautiful people, but their signature frequency might be a destructive match to yours.
Right.
And in that
Absolutely.
case, they're bringing down your energy. And
Yep.
it's harder to get at the level, it's harder to get that clear to perform at the level you want to be. So one of the things I really remember from taking a deep dive back into those long years on World Cup, um, how amazing the finish team was when I first made World Cup. They
Hmm.
were all winning and sweeping podiums. They were all brothers. They were all related. They were best friends. They
Hmm.
were elevating each other with signature frequencies that were in a constructive match.
Right.
And nowadays, I go to spas all over the world. My product sells mostly at high-end resort spas. So I'll fly there. I'll do a training. And everybody takes the energy fit. And I can always tell if it's a spa that works really well, that's flowing, that's happy, that's bringing in money, that's doing, spreading health and wellness, if there's a commonality in the energy fit for everybody there. So the energy fit always recommends two. And
Hmm.
so everybody would get, say, 240 kilojoules per mole, and then they get a various other one, but there's always a common thread. And
Right.
that's because like energy attracts like energy. So the spa director is attracting back what similar energy to her own, and then everybody gets along well. But it's true, one apple can spoil the whole bunch. I mean, even if you throw a rotten apple in with a whole bunch of healthy apples,
Yeah.
this is not just a wives' tale. You will see all the other apples die,
Right.
right? Like,
No, you see it. Yeah.
they entrain with each other. It's the law of entrainment. It's natural laws of physics. And so from my perspective on World Cup, not really on a conscious level, but on a subconscious level, we all had ways of dealing with that. So
Mhm.
some people would go for long runs. Some people might meditate, whatever floats their boat. Some people might drink a lot. We definitely partied a lot, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, it was just their way of masking that feeling or masking,
Sure.
but without really knowing what was causing it. And if you didn't find ways to deal with those things, you didn't stay on World Cup for very long. I was
Hmm.
on World Cup for 18 years. I had to find ways to, I mean, I don't want to say anything negative, but there, it
Sure.
wasn't
No, you have to.
necessarily
It's
people, but it
difficult.
was
Yeah.
like politics. It was,
Oh, yeah.
all these things that I had to figure out a way around in
Hmm.
order to accomplish what I was there to accomplish.
Now, for the listeners out there, where can they go to find out more about Lab? What's the best way to online?
Yeah, it's just
Mhm.
fiatlab.com. And that's just PHIA. I am obsessed with the divine proportions of the number phi. So everything I do, even when I was skiing, it was all phi proportions. So hence the name.
Perfect. Well, I know you have to run. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. This has been awesome. So thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you. And I do have a book that explains it all in more detail if anybody's interested.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks a lot. Bye, everybody.
Have a great day.
Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you're watching or listening on YouTube, please make sure you hit that bell button so you get notified every time a new episode drops. Thanks.